Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Shabbos Daf Kuf Beis. We're at the Mishnah on top. Says the Mishnah Hazorek, if one throws an object, for instance, from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah, v'nizkar, and he reminded himself that it's Shabbos. When did that happen? After the object has already left his hand, it's already flying, it's already mid-air. At that point, he reminded himself that it's Shabbos. So that's the first thing that happened. Number two, there was something wrong with the hanacha, with the landing of the chayfetz. Kol ta'achar, another person came along and caught it, intercepted it mid-air. So he ran over and caught it mid-air and never let it land. Or kol ta'kelev, a dog caught it mid-air. Or it was consumed by flame, never properly landed down on the floor. Potter, he is potter, he's exempt. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi ran on top of the Amud Hazorek b'shoygeg v'niskashu Shabbos. He remembers that it's Shabbos. After the stone already left his hands, it's out of his control. It's mid-air. At that point, he reminded himself that it's Shabbos prior to its landing. Kol ta'achar. Says Rashi, at this point, we figure that two things went wrong. Number one, after he reminded himself that it's Shabbos. So number one, he had that reminder, he remembered that it's Shabbos when it was already mid-air. Afterwards, kol ta'achar, another person came along and caught it, intercepted it mid-air. Havalu shnayim shasor. So now we have a malacha which was performed by two people. Ruvain did the akira, Shimon did the hanacha. For instance, Shimon ran over from where he was standing. He ran over to intercept the object. Or a dog caught it in his mouth. In which case it's not a hanacha. Why? Because the ba'inan makim dalit, we need that the chayfetz should land on a place which has a surface of 4 tfachim, which is a makim chashav, as opposed to the mouth of a kelef, which doesn't contain that dimension, that area. So either one of these two things happened. Either somebody ran over from where he was standing and intercepted midair, or the dog was standing in his place and the chayfetz just happened to land in his mouth, which is not a makom chashiv. So therefore he's potter. So once again Rashi says, at this point the Gemara is going to assume that two things happened here. There were two deficiencies in this masa, in this act of throwing. Number one, it wasn't completely a shoygig. In the middle, in mid-flight, he had a reminder, he remembered that it's Shabbos. Number two, there was something wrong with the hanacha as well. One of three scenarios. Either somebody ran over from where he was standing and caught it mid-air, or the dog was standing in his place and the chayfetz landed in his mouth. So in the person running over and catching it, Rashi says it's shnaim she'oso, it's a malacha completed by two people. In the case where the dog was standing in his place and the chayfetz landed in his mouth, the problem there is that there was no hanacha on a makam dalet. And finally, gives us a case where nisrafa, the chayfetz never landed on the ground, it was consumed by flames prior to its landing. So there were two things wrong. There was something wrong with the shoygei, because he reminded himself that it's Shabbos. And number two, there wasn't a proper hanacha, and therefore he's potter. Continues the Mishnah. The third line of the Mishnah, Zorak lasis chabura. If a person throws an object with the intention to inflict a wound, bein ba'adam, whether in a person or bein b'behema or an animal, so inflicting a wound is a malacha. It's a chayvel. So he throws his chayves to make this chabura, v'nizkar, and he reminds himself, Asher lasis chabura, prior to the chabura, the damage, the infliction of the wound actually taking place. So he was nizkar, reminded himself when the chayfetz was mid-air. Potter, he's exempt from chatas. Why? Says the Mishnah, Zaklal, this is the general rule when it comes to chatas liability. Kol chayav chatos, all those individuals who are liable to chatas, meaning all the chiyuv chatos will only take place in an chayav, and they are only chayav, asher tehet chilasan v'seif and shkaga. It is only if their beginning and their end took place with an unawareness. So the act was initiated with a shkaga and concluded in a state of mind of inadvertence of shkaga. However, tchilasan shkaga, let's say their beginning was b'shogig v'seif and zadin, but they concluded with awareness. He reminded himself that it's Shabbos prior to conclusion of this malacha. Or the reverse, tchilasan zadin v'seif and shkaga. It began with a mazid and ended with shogig. P'turin ad shetei tchilasan. v'soif and shkoga. This is a prerequisite for chiyuv chatos. There needs to be a state of shkoga, inadvertence, from the initiation of the malacha, at the initiation of the malacha, and at the conclusion of the malacha. So in the case where a person throws a stone to inflict a wound, to make a chabura, and while it's mid-air, he reminds himself that it's Shabbos. So right now he's fully aware, he's amazed. So although the initiation of the malacha, the actual throwing, took place when he was in a state of mind of shogeg, he is patur because the completion of the malacha was at a point at where he was amazed. Therefore he's patur. Continues the Gemara. Let's go back to the opening halacha of the Mishnah, which seemed to have told us that this fellow is patur when he throws the chayfetz, because of two reasons. Number one, he became aware that it's Shabbos. This happened mid-flight. And number two, there was something wrong. There was something deficient with the hanocha. Ha-nocha chayev. Apparently, we infer from the Mishnah that if it would have properly landed without any interference, he would have been chayev. V'alei nizkar. How can you say it's chayev? He would remind himself that it's Shabbos mid-flight. The conclusion of the malacha of Haitzah took place when he was amazed. So how can you suggest that he's chayev? Utnan. And we just learned in the Mishnah, Kol chayav chatois, Eiron chayaven, asher teit chilasan v'sefer shgaga. Mishnah clearly gives us this rule that there's only a chatos liability when the initiation and the conclusion, the beginning and the end of the malacha took place in a state of mind of shgaga. So why does the beginning of the Mishnah seem to imply that it is only because there was something wrong also with the hanocha? Somebody else caught it, a dog, flames. That is the reason for the p'tur. Why isn't the fact that he became aware of Shabbos mid-flight sufficient to negate the chiyuv here? Because the conclusion of the malacha, the landing, was not bishgaga. Says the Ma'ar of Kahana. Seifa, this latter clause of the Mishnah, which gives us this rule that it needs to begin and end with a shgaga. That is not speaking about if somebody throws a chayfetz. If somebody throws a chayfetz, he's lost control of the chayfetz. It left his hands. He's not anymore influencing the event here. It's out of his hands, regardless of the fact that he reminds himself that it's Shabbos. That's irrelevant. We don't reckon with it. It's already out of his hands. The seifa of the Mishnah tells us that he needs to be b'shogeg at the conclusion. That's speaking about a case. Seifa ason lelachta u'masna. We're speaking about a lachta, as a sort of a clamp. Rashi says they would place it on the donkey to support its load on both sides of the donkey. And this wooden clamp, had a string. So the lachta is this clamp, u'masna is the string, is the rope that he is throwing. So he threw this item, this clamp, and since he's still holding on to the rope, then his machshava, his state of mind, can influence the state of affairs here. It's still in his hands. He's still engaged in the malacha of zrika, because he can retract it at any moment. So only in that case, specifically there, when he's still engaged in the malacha, he's still holding on to it, he's still retract it if he wants, he can still bring it back. Only there does the Mishnah tell us that he needs to maintain a state of shkoga, inadvertence, at the initiation and at the conclusion, because he's still involved, he's still actively involved. However, in the case where a person takes an evan, a stone, and merely throws it, lets go of it, he's no longer in control. He doesn't influence the state of affairs here. So even if he had a reminder in the middle, he was nizkar that it's Shabbos, it's irrelevant. So it's only because it was also caught by somebody else, or a dog, or a flame. That's why he's patur. And actually the Mishnah is telling us, you meant to know that even though he reminded himself in the middle, that's irrelevant. The only reason why he's patur is because somebody else caught it. Because once the chayvus left his hand, we don't reckon with his state of mind any longer. He's not influencing state of affairs. It is only the seifa which is discussing a chayvus which is still somewhat in his hand, still in his control. In that case, he needs to maintain that state of shkoga at the end of the malacha when the chayvus lands. Because otherwise, he affects the status, because he's still in control of it. So Rav Kahana tells us that the Reisha is speaking about zrika, and he let go. The Seifa is speaking about they're still somewhat holding on to it. And that's why he needs to be b'shogeg at the end of the malacha. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Lachto masna? In the case where he's still holding on to the masna of this lachta, holding on to the rope, it's still in his hands. So even if he was b'shoigig from beginning till the end, he would still be pater. He never let go of the chayvus. There's no completion of the transfer here. There's no zrika. He's still holding on to it. So you can't say that the Mishnah is speaking about such a case. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Rav Kahana meant to say kigoy, for example, sheniskavel es chabura. What he meant to say that this lachto of masna was being used to inflict a wound. He wasn't speaking about the melacha of eitzah. He was speaking about the melacha of inflicting a wound. And with regard to inflicting a wound, it's irrelevant of whether he's holding on to it. It's still a malacha. So if he throws this wood, this clamp, and to inflict a wound on somebody, so even if he's still holding on to the rope, he would be doing a malacha. So the Mishnah tells us, but you must know, there's a precondition here. He needs to be at a state of shoigig, of inadvertence, of unawareness. Number one, at the initiation, at the beginning, and also at the conclusion, at the end. So this is the pshat in the seif, in the latter clause of the Mishnah. Zeh klal. You need to be b'shoigig in the beginning, at the end. We're speaking about a case where he's holding on to something and throwing it to make a chabur, and he's still somewhat in control. He's still holding on to the rope, in which case he can still retract it. In which case we reckon with his state of mind. So if he becomes amazed midway, he's no longer regarded as a shoigig, and he's pater from a chatas. It is only if he's a shoigig at the conclusion of the malacha as well, when it inflicts the wound. So this is the pshat in the seifa. However, in a case where a person throws a stone and lets go, we don't reckon with his state of mind any longer. Even if he is nizkar, if he reminds himself that Shabbos mid-flight, midway, it's irrelevant for us. Says the Gemara, but this as well is already stated in the Mishnah. It can't be that the Zeh Klal, this rule of the Mishnah, is coming to address a case where a person is throwing this thing to make a chabura. The Mishnah already discusses chabura. The Mishnah already says, Hazar Klas is chabura, bein ba'adam, bein ba'behema. If he throws, for instance, a rock to inflict a wound, whether in a person or an animal, v'nizkar ashlan asas chabura pater, and remind himself that it's Shabbos. He had an awareness, v'nizkar. He had a reminder that it's Shabbos prior to the conclusion, prior to the chabura being inflicted, he's pater. So the Mishnah already tells us that there's no reason for the Mishnah to repeat the same halacha twice, so you cannot suggest that this clause of Zeh Klal is referring to chabura. El amarava b'mavir. The Mishnah, which tells us that you need to be b'shoigig at the beginning and at the end, is speaking about not throwing. When he throws, it's irrelevant because it's already out of his hand, it's out of his control. It's irrelevant whether or not he's a shoigig at the conclusion. The Mishnah is discussing maver, transferring, manually transferring a chayfetz, 4 amas Yisravim. And with regard to that case, the Mishnah tells us he's in control. It's in his hands. He needs to be at a state of shoigig. Number one, at the initiation of the malacha and at the conclusion as well. Otherwise, he will influence the state of affairs and he will be pater. So Rabbi tells us the reisha of the Mishnah, which seems to ignore the fact that he had an awareness in the middle, is discussing zrika. The sefer, which tells us that there's a precondition of shgaga all throughout. He needs to be a shogeg in the beginning and at the end, is speaking about maver, when he's holding on to it and is actively engaged in doing the malacha. Says the Gemara, how could you say that the Zeh Klal is speaking about maver? V'Zeh Klal the ktani, azrika ktani. If we take a close look at the Mishnah discusses Zeh Klas's chabura, and then proceeds with Zeh Klal, which seems to imply that this Klal of the requirement of shgaga at the conclusion is speaking about zrika as well, not by maver. Not only by maver, zrika as well. Says the Gemara, Elam Rava, Tartik Tani. Says Rava, no, even Zoyrek, even by Zoyrek, he needs to be b'shoigig at the conclusion of the malacha, even though it's not in his hands. He needs to be in a state of mind of unawareness, even when the zrika, when the item lands. So what then is the pshat of the reisha of the Mishnah, of the opening statement of the Mishnah, which seems to imply to us that the awareness midway is irrelevant? Says Rava, Tartik Tani. The Mishnah at the outset is actually presenting to us 2 different types of cases, 2 different scenarios of exemption of Tur. Number one, hazorik. If one throws a chayvetz, v'nizkar, and he reminds himself that it's Shabbos, ma'achar sheyotza miyada, after the chayvetz already left his hand, that is already one reason to exempt him. Inami, or in addition, loy nizkar. He perhaps had not reminded himself, but there was something wrong with the landing. V'kolta achar, somebody else caught it. I called a kelab, or a dog, or shenizrafo got burnt butter. So yes, indeed, even when it comes to zrika, he needs to be b'shoigeg at the conclusion of the zrika at the landing. The Mishnah, in the opening statement, is actually presenting us two scenarios of ptur, of exemption. Either he had a reminder, and that is a reason to exempt him, or there was something wrong, deficient with the hanacha. Rav Ashi agrees with Rava, yes, that the requirement of shoigeg applies to zrika as well. He answers a bit differently. He says that we'll interpret the Mishnah a bit differently than Rava. Chesuri mechsra. Let's view the Mishnah as though it's missing some words. V'ochik tani, and this how we're meant to interpret the Mishnah. The Mishnah begins by saying hazorik v'nizkar ma'achash yosam yodai. If one throws a chayfetz and he reminds himself after it already left his hands, kolta achar, somebody else intercepted, or kolta kelab, or a dog, or shenisr for potter. We imply from this ha nacha chayiv. Apparently, if it landed properly, he would be chayiv. But medvar mamur, when is this said? That he forgot again, meaning what happened was that he threw the item when he was b'shoigig. Mid-flight, he reminds himself that it's Shabbos. And then chazav v'shachach, he again forgot. He was a forgetful fellow, he forgot that it's Shabbos. And then it lands during his state of forgetfulness. So since the beginning was b'shoigig and the end was b'shoigig, we don't reckon with what happened in the middle. And therefore he's chayiv. So in the Mishnah, it implies that there's a diak in the Mishnah that, if not for the fact that it was caught by somebody else, who'd be chayiv. That's speaking about a case where, at the conclusion, at the landing, at the proper landing of the object, he had simply forgotten again. So he's chayiv, because the tchila and the seif was b'shgaga. Avol, says the Gemara, loy chazav v'shachach. But if he hadn't forgotten it once again, so once he reminded himself, he maintained that state of awareness all throughout until it landed, Potter, certainly he's Potter, regardless, irrelevant of whether it was caught by somebody else or not. Why? Shekol chayav b'chatois. All those that are chayav b'chatos and chayav are not liable until the initiation of the luch and the conclusion happened during a state of shkoga, of unawareness. So Rav Ashi concurs with Rava that even when it comes to throwing, there's this requirement. He really interprets the Mishnah a bit differently. That the Mishnah is coming to cover this case where he had forgotten and reminded himself again, in which case he would be chayiv since the conclusion of the malacha happened when he was a shegig. Continues the Gemara, zeh haklal, kol chayav b'chatois. So once again, the beginning and the end needs to be b'shegig in order to hold him accountable and liable with a chayav chatos. Says the Gemara, what about the following case? Itmar we learned. Shtei amas b'shegig, if one transfers a chayfetz, rishus harabim, at a distance of not 4 amas, which is the minimum requirement, but rather a distance of 6 amas. Now, interesting thing happened. Shtei amas b'shegig, the initial 2 amas, was done b'shegig, inadvertently. Shtei amas b'mezid, the following 2 amas were done b'mezid. Willfully, he knew that it's Shabbos. Shtei amas b'shegig, then the final 2 amas, number 5 and 6, happened once again b'shegig. He was totally unaware that it's Shabbos. So we have 2 b'shegig, 2 b'mezid, and the final 2 b'shegig. What will be halach in this case? Rabba Amar Potter. Rabba says he's Potter. We don't regard him as a shogeg. We focus on the middle amas. Rava Amar Chayiv. Rabba says the conclusion was b'shogeg. He's chayiv. The Gemara will analyze and explain that actually there's no machlekes. They're both speaking about different cases. Rabba speaking about one case. Rava speaking about another. Says the Gemara, Rabba Amar Potter. Let's analyze. Why is he Potter? The Gemara is going to tell us that actually we're speaking about a person who's doing ma'avir. He's transferring, he's manually carrying something in Rishus Rabim, in this case at a distance of 6 amas. So Rabbi says he's Potter. Why is he Potter? Because Amma 3 and 4 happened b'mezid. And therefore, he's no longer regarded as having done the malacha b'shogeg. Explains the Gemara. Afilu l'Rabban Gamliel the Amar ein yedei lechatzi shiur. Now there's a machlekes later on in the Masechta regarding a case where, for instance, a person is doing a malacha of writing, which needs a minimum requirement is 2 letters. So he writes 1 letter when he is in a state of shogeg, and then he becomes aware, he remembers that it's Shabbos. Then he forgets and concludes the other letter, which is the second half of the Malacha, again in a state of Shoigig. Says Rabban Gamliel, we ignore that Yediyah that he had midway. It's called the Yediyah L'Chatzi Shir. What did he become aware of? That he did half a Malacha? That's not reckoned with. That's not considered to be a significant Yediyah. A Yediyah is only if he becomes aware of the fact that he did a Malacha, a full Malacha, but a half a Malacha, that's not reckoned with. So that midpoint knowledge, midpoint awareness is irrelevant, not reckoned with, and therefore he's considered to be a full-fledged Shoigig. When he completes the Malacha, we combine the two letters, he's Chayiv. According to the Rabbanim, the fact that he had a Yediyah, a knowledge and awareness, in the middle, midway, through that Malacha, that separates things, that terminates the Shgaga. You cannot any longer combine those two letters to each other. Yesh Yediyah L'Chatzi Yeshir. Says the Gemara, our case is unrelated to that case. Even according to Rabban Gamliel, who maintains that the Yediyah that took place midway is not reckoned with, doesn't affect the process. That's strictly over there. Why? Because eventually he concluded the Malacha, he did the second letter, and he finished it when he was in a state of Shoigig. So according to Rabban Gamliel, we combine the two letters and we focus on the conclusion. He was B'Shoigig. When he finished the Malacha, he's Chayiv. However, in our case, the Malacha concluded b'mezid. Why? Because where was he? Where was his mind holding when he finished the Shiur of Maver? What is the Shiur of Maver? 4 Amos. At that point, at Amma number 4, he was b'mezid. So the Malacha concluded when he was b'mezid. Let's see inside. Rab Amar Potter, in our case, is Potter when he transfers manually this Chayfetz, because we view the Malacha as though it's split into two, as though it finished at Amma number 4. So he split the 6 into 2 parts. And since at the conclusion of Amma number 4, which can be viewed as at the conclusion of the Shiur of the Malacha, he was at a state of Mezid, therefore he's part of a Machatas. Afilu l'Rabban Gamliel, the Amar in Yediyah L'Chatzi Shir, even according to him who holds that a knowledge which takes place in the middle of a Malacha is not reckoned with. Hasam, who? The Chika Gamar Shiura. That's over there when it comes to writing, because when he concluded the Shiur of writing, which is the 2 letters, B'Shoigig Gamar, he concluded when he was in a state of Shoigig. Aval in our case, the Mezid Loi. But in our case, that he concluded the Shiur Malacha, when he finished number 4, he was in a state of Mezid Loi, then certainly he's not a Shoigig. So it's agreed upon all that in our case, he will not bring a Chatas. Says Rabbi Mai, what are we speaking about? Well, he transferred the item here at a distance of 6 amas. How did he do it? Ibe Zorik. Was it done through throwing? Shoigiku. Then certainly you must regard him as a shoigig. Why? You can't say, well, the Malacha concluded at Amma number 4. It didn't conclude anything at Amma number 4 because it was out of his hands. It was one big Malacha. From Amma number 1 to Amma number 6. He wasn't actually engaged doing the Malacha. So you can't say, well, the Malacha concluded at number 4. It was mid-air, it was flying. It was one continuous Malacha from 1 till 6. It was already out of his hands. So you can't say the Malacha terminated at number 4. Rather, it is one big Malacha from 1 to 6. So you must focus at the beginning and at the end. And they were both Bishgaga. Ibazarik Shoigiku, and certainly he's a Shoigig. Elba Maver, we're speaking about Maver when he's actually manually transferring, he's holding on to the Chayfetz, he's actually engaged in transferring it, in which case we could say that when he gets to Amma number 4, he's finished. He concluded that segment of the Malacha, he finished the Shiur, and at that point he was amazed. So he brings no Chatas. So that's the Pshat in Rabbah, Rabbah telling us that he's Potter, because he's amazing. Continues the Gemara. Rav Amar Chayiv. Rav told us that in this type of case he would be Chayiv. The Gemara is going to tell us that Rav is speaking about a case of Zoirik. And as we just said, when a person throws something, he's not in control. We can't split the Malacha into 2. We must view it as one continuous Malacha from beginning to end. And since at the beginning and at the end he was B'Shoigig, so he's Chayiv Achatas. The Gemara will analyze for us. Rav Amar Chayiv. This will address even Shitas Rabbanon, who tell us by the person who's writing those 2 letters. The Amri, Yesh Yediyah L'Chatzi Shir. The Yediyah, the knowledge, the awareness that took place midway when he's holding at the point of half a shear of the ksiva, that yediyah influences matters. It affects things. And it splits his two letters into two. You can no longer combine them. And therefore, he will not bring a chatas. That's over there. Over there, it's within his control. He's writing. He can stop whenever he wants. Therefore, we regard the idea that took place midway, at midpoint, as having split the malach into two, and they can no longer combine. Avalachim, in our case, where he's throwing it, it's not his hand, it's not in control to terminate things, to influence. He can't split the malach into two. So, in our case, certainly, we can't view the malach as though it's being split into two. Because once he throws it and leaves his hands, it's gone. He can't change it he can't split it into two malachas. It's one continuous throw from beginning to end. And therefore, we don't focus on at midpoint. The fact that he was amazed at midpoint, at Amma of 3 or 4, that can't change it. That can't change the malacha. That can't split into two. We can't say the malacha was terminated, completed at Amma number 4. It's not in his hands to do that. So certainly in this case, we ignore the idea that took place in the middle. Rather, we focus on the initiation and at the conclusion, which were both b'shgaga and ischayv. Havalacha, once again, the ein biyadei. It's not in his hands to control things. Loi, certainly, we ignore what happens in the middle. We focus merely at the beginning, at the end of this one singular malacha. Since they took place when he was at a state of unawareness, he is chayv. Says the Gemara, what are we speaking about? Even maver? Was he actually carrying it? Har biyadei. It's in his hands and his control to stop midpoint. So certainly we can view the malacha as though it was terminated and completed at Amma number 4 when he's amazed. No, rather we're speaking about he threw it, in which case he's not in control of it any longer, and we can't just split the malacha into two. We can't say, well, mid-flight we terminate the malacha was concluded. No, it's already mid-air, it's out of his control. There's one malacha that took place from beginning of the flight to the end of the flight, and therefore the fact that he was amazed at midpoint will not influence things. We merely look at the beginning and the end of that single malacha. So the beginning was at Amma number 1, the ending was at Amma number 6. Since they were both b'shogeg, he's chayiv. So in summary, the Mishnah taught us that if one throws a chayfetz, whether he was doing malacha veitzah, or he was doing the malacha of making a chabura, he's chayiv achatos, provided that he was a shogeg at the outset and at the conclusion. What if he was amazed either at the initiation or at the conclusion? He'll be pater. The Gemara told us that this applies even to zrika, even if one throws a chayfetz and left his hands. This requirement still applies. The Gemara now concluding the case where he transferred a chayfetz at a distance of 6 amas in Shesarabim. The first 2 amas were b'shogeg, the following 2 amas b'mezid, and the final 2 amas b'shogeg. The Gemara tells us it depends what happened. If he was being ma'avir, he's actually holding on to the chayfetz and carrying it, he will be pater because the shiur was concluded when he was amazed. The shiur was when he reached 4 amas. At that point, he was in a state of amazed. Therefore, he's pater from achatas. Whereas, in the case where he threw the chayfetz, which is out of his hands, the malacha here begins at Amma number 1 and concludes at Amma number 6. It's one continuous malacha. We ignore whatever happened in the middle. He can't split the malacha into 2 if it's out of his hands. In this case, he's chayiv, because the malacha concluded when he was in a state of shogeg. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabba, Zorak, if one throws a chayvetz of a nocha b'fi kelef and it happened to land in the mouth of a dog, or b'fi kivshan, or in the mouth of a furnace, and was consumed by the flames, chayiv. Says the Gemara, v'anan tnan, but haven't we just learned in the Mishnah, kol ta'acher, if somebody else intercepts the item mid-air, oy kol ta'kelef, or the dog, or shenisr for potter. Says the Gemara, there's a difference. Hasam, the way Mechavin, our Mishnah speaks about, there was no kavanah, there's no intent to have the chayvetz land in the dog's mouth or in the mouth of the furnace. However, in our case, the Kamachavin is speaking about that he had the intention, he planned on having this chayvetz land right there, in which case he grants the mouth of the kelef chashivas, he gives it significance. He regards it as a makam of hanacha. The same thing with the furnace. So even though it doesn't have a surface area of 4 by 4 tefachim. The reason why we need a 4 tefachim surface is to give it chashiva significance. But in a case where intentionally he wants it to land there, he's granting it significance. So it is regarded as though it landed on a proper surface of 4 tefachim. Amar Beir Ba'abayi Afanan. We also learned that Mishnah which supports this notion that a person's machshava can grant significance. The Mishnah says, Yesh oichel achila achas. We have a scenario where a person could commit one transgression, one ma'isa of achila of something which is asur, and he will incur, this will result in many liabilities. V'chayv aleh, daled chatois v'asham echad. He will be liable for chatois and one asham. How's that? Hatame, he was of Tame, she'achal chelev, who ate forbidden fats. V'hu noiser, this chelev was actually left over from a carbon, which it's asur to eat. Min hamukdash, it was from a carbon. So it was, number one, chelev, number two, it was left over past the prescribed time, and it was a carbon. B'yom Kippur, it was on Yom Kippur. So how many things did he do wrong? So number one, let's start with Yom Kippur. He ate Yom Kippur. It was chelev. It was from a carbon. A person cannot eat the chelev of a carbon. Even a kohen can't do that. So for that he would be chayiv asham. And we have the fact that it's noiser, and the fact that he's a tameh and he's eating carbonates. So we have 4 chatois for tameh, for chelev, for noiser. The fact that it's Yom Kippur, and we have the asham for the fact that it was a carbon. Reb Meir Omer, I have another one to add to the list. After Moisés Shabbos, even let's say also was Shabbos, v'yitzir b'fiv. Let's say it was also Shabbos and he was eating it, so he carried this food in his mouth into Shus Ram Chayiv. So this is an additional chiyuv because of Eitzah. Now, where was the hanacha? Where did it land? Taisa says that the blia, the fact that he swallowed it, the food comes to rest. It's at rest when it's being swallowed. That is called a hanacha. Okay, so Rameh adds another one. Chacham said, we agree to the concept, but it's not part of our list. Amrullah, they told him, Einem in Hashem. It's not part of the category here. It doesn't fit into this category because I'm discussing chiyuvim, which are resulting from a masa achila. You're speaking about a ma'isa haitzah. Therefore, it's unrelated to our case. Apparently, Rameh holds that the reason why it's considered haitzah, as Taisa explains, because the swallowing grants it a status of hanacha. So it's also related to it's eating. It's an eating related malacha. Okay, in any case, we have Rameh who tells us that carrying through one's mouth is regarded as haitzah. This is not the usual manner of carrying. We had a Mishnah earlier which told us if one carries an item in his mouth, he's potter. It's like kederech. It's not considered to be the usual manner of carrying. Ella, rather, kivin the kamechaven, since he has intent, he needs to eat. It's part of his machshava that the food should be in his mouth. Kivin kamechaven machshavtoi. So this machshava that he needs to eat, he needs to have the food in his mouth while he's eating. Mishavi l'mokim. It grants, it normalizes it. It makes it derech. Or as Rebbe Chananel says, the problem here was that his mouth did not have a surface area of 4 tefachim. But since he grants it significance, he needs the food to be eaten in his mouth at this point, he's giving it a chashivas meshavi l'mokim, and is regarded as though it's a mokim which has 4 tefachim. Hochanami says here as well, when he wants his chayvus to land in the mouth of a dog, given the kamechaven, since he has intent, machshavta, his intent, meshavi l'mokim, grants that mouth of the dog a chashivas of a mokim choshev, and therefore he is chayev as well. So it depends. If it happened inadvertently, where there was no intent of the chayvus landing at the mouth of a dog or the mouth of the furnace, he's potter, because there's no mokim of dalat tefachim. But if it was part of his original plan, so this intent grants chashivas significance, and we regard it as though it's a surface of 4 tefachim, and there was a proper hanacha. Hadron loch hazirik. Says the Mishnah. Habayna. So we concluded our discussions regarding the malacha v'yitzah of zrika. Now the Mishnahs will continue discussing other malachas and their various shiurim. Habayna. One builds one of the 39 malachas. Kama yivna v'yechayv. What is the shear for him to build to be chayv? Habayna kol even a minute amount. The Mishnah continues, if one chisels a stone, so he smooths out the stone or engraves in it. If one strikes the final blow, Rashi says this is during quarrying, so they take the stone and they cut it out of the mountain, and that last blow actually removes the stone, loosens it from the mountain. Ubematar uses a sledgehammer. So either way, whether he's makir b'patish, a hammer or a sledgehammer, or the Mishnah gives us another example of a malacha, hakedeach, of a person drills a hole in a wall, for instance. So when it comes to all these activities, mesates, makir b'patish, or hakedeach, what is the shear? What is the required shear? Kol shu chayv. Even just a little bit is chayv. Zeh klal. This is the rule. Kol oisav malacha. If one performs a malacha, u'melachtim miskayemes b'Shabbos, and this malacha is something which is Rashi says sheyesh miskayemes kayetzebay. It can be left as is, without adding to it. It's considered to be the conclusion of the malacha. So this is considered to be a malacha, and he's chayiv. Again, a person performs a malacha, or malachtim miskayemes b'Shabbos, and some will just leave it as is. It's considered to be the conclusion of that malacha, chayiv. Another case, also a case where a person takes this kurnas, this hammer, and he gives a blow on the sadan. This is a piece of metal. So the Gemara explains they used to take the hammer, and they wanted to keep the bottom smooth because it was used for flattening out precious metal. So they would strike a blow on the sadan, on this glob of metal, to smooth out the bottom of the hammer. So even a person who does this b'shas malacha during his work, chayiv v'pnei shulka masaka malacha, as though it's like he's improving. It's like improvement of malacha. It's also considered to be a malacha on Shabbos. The Gemara will explain exactly the reason behind this malacha. So once again, the Mishnah told us that when it comes to baina, the shiur is kolshu. When he chisels or he's striking the final blow, now that in itself, makar patish, is considered to be one of the malachas. So a person strikes the final blow, he concludes the activity of the malacha by doing that, or uses a sledgehammer, or he drills a small hole. Then we'll explain exactly which malacha is being done when he drills a small hole. So in all these examples, what is the shear? Kolshu. Continues the Gemara. Building just a kolshu, what significance does that have? Kolshu l'may chazia. What is it useful for? Amar Rav Yirmiyah, we find a use, a purpose, a benefit, even for a small measure of binyan. Shekein ani, because a pauper chayfer guma, he will dig a small hole, for instance, in the floor of his home, latzniya ba prutoisav, to hide in it his coins. So we see that even a small measure of binyan has significance, has benefit. The kavasaga b'mishkan. Likewise, you find a precedent in the Mishkan. Taisa says, why do we need to find a precedent by the Mishkan? Because a small amount of binyan is loy choshev, it's not significant. Perhaps it wouldn't qualify as building. Therefore, the Gemara looks to find a precedent in the Mishkan as well for this concept, or even baina kolshu. Says, well, where do we find it? Shekein toifer yiriz, because the sewers of the curtains, tchoifer guma, they will dig a small hole, to hide in there their needles. Abai Amar, no, they wouldn't do that in the Mishkan, given the Mishtaki, because the needles will get rusty down in the ground. They don't do this. Ella, rather, this is the benefit of even a small amount of bain. Shekein ani, because a proper oiseh put a kirok tana, he will fashion the legs of like a tripod of his small size oven, small size stove, lishbois like kederok tana, to place on a small keder, a small pot. So we see that binyan will even benefit when it is a small measure. The kavasaga Mishkan, likewise, we find a precedent to this concept by the Mishkan. Mevashli saman, those who cooked up the dyes, the herbs needed to color the materials. Mevashli saman litzbaya yiriyos, to dye the curtains. Shechasher malachta, let's say they're missing some dye, they ran out of dye. So they need to supplement. Oisin pitputik tana, they will fashion these legs for a small stove. Lishpois tana, to place on it a small pot to cook up the additional herbs and dyes that they need. No, they wouldn't do that by the Mishkan. They had plenty. They were generous. It was a ashiris. They would conduct themselves with generosity and wealth. This is a practice of an ani. This is anius. This is a practice of poverty. This has no place in the Mishkan, which is a makam ashiris. So they'll never run out of dye. They would make more than enough and they would never come to such a situation where they would need to supplement by cooking just a little bit extra dye. Ella, rather, the benefit in a bit of building is as follows. Shekem balabayis, sheishli nekev b'birasai, a homeowner who finds a hole in the wall of his mansion. V'saismai, so he goes out and he closes it up with some cement, some clay. So even a small measure of building has significance. The Kavasog Mishkan, likewise, we find a precedent by the Mishkan, Shken Keresh, Shenaflu by Darna. So the board which experienced the effect of a Darna, of a worm, which bored a hole in it, Matal Ever. He would pour into the hole some liquid lead, and close up the hole. So even a small measure of binyan is significant, has chashivas, has benefit. So in summary, boina even applies to a small amount, because even that has chashivas, as we find from the Baal Bayis, and likewise the precedent in the Mishkan. Amar Shmuel, hametzate d'so even chayiv. If one, he straightens out a stone, we're speaking about a stone used at the bottom level of a foundation, so he levels it with the earth, he levels it and makes sure that's straight, even without using cement, chayiv. That's considered to be boina. Meisvei, we have a kashma brisa. Echad noisan se'evan, the brisa says, if one places a stone, echad noisan satit, and the second fellow places a cement, ha noisan satit chayiv. The one who adds a cement, he is chayiv. Apparently, cement is required for malacha of boina. Says one of the Tamech. Now, according to your approach, Ema Seifa. Let's take a look at the next part of the brisa. Rabbi Yossi, Rafilu hella v'hiniach. Even if he brought up and he placed a stone, al gabe dima shlavanim chayiv. Even if he really places a stone up on the pile, up on the stone wall, he's chayiv. And even if he doesn't position it properly, even if it's leaning to the side, so we see that not only if he's lacking cement, he's chayiv, even if he's not even positioning it properly, it's leaning to one side, he's still chayiv. So we seem to have a self-contradiction here. Ella, rather, you must interpret as follows. It depends where he's placing the stone. Telasa binyane havu. There are three different aspects of this wall, of this building. Tata, the lower level, the lowest row of stones, which forms the basis of this wall. Mitzia, then you have the midsection, which requires the cement. V'ila, and its uppermost layer. Tata, the lower level, the lowest row of stones, boitzedudi ba'afra. They form the basis, the support of this wall. So they need to be positioned properly in the right angle, make sure they're level with the earth around it. And that is what Shmuel is speaking about. Mitzia, the midsection, meaning anything beyond that lowest row, boy namatina, requires cement to remain in place. So that's the beginning of the brisa. Cement is required in this case. However, Eloi, the uppermost layer, banucha ba'alma, since there's nothing on top of it, merely placing it on the wall is sufficient, even without leveling it and positioning it properly. And that is what Rav Yossi is speaking about. So in summary, we learned that if a person is boin even koshu is chayav, the Gemara tells us that Baal Bayis will close up a small hole in his wall. Likewise, in the Mishkan, they would close up the hole in those krushim. The Gemara tells us in conclusion that when it comes to building, there are three layers. There's the bottom layer, where he needs to level the stone properly. That's the bottom layer. When the Brisa tells us he needs to place cement, that is speaking about the next layer, the middle part of the wall, all the way up to the top. When Rabbi Yossi says even placing a stone without even leveling it, that is already considered to be boina. That's speaking about the uppermost layer, the top row, which doesn't even require leveling. Continues the Gemara. If one chisels a stone, he's chayiv. Based on what? On account of which malacha is he chayiv? Where machlekes? Mesates mishumah mechayiv. Based on what is he chayiv? Rav mishum boina. He's fashioning, he's building this stone, which is going to be used in a building. So he's preparing the building, and this is called boina. Ushmol mishum makav patish. Merely shaping a stone, that's not called binyan. It's not a significant act of building. He's merely designing the stone, or some say, since it's not mechubel l'kag, attached to the ground, according to Shmuel, he's not doing boina. Rather, which malacha is he performing? A malacha of makav patish, that final blow, meaning he's putting the finishing touches on the stone, and that is the malacha that he's doing. The Gemara is going to give us another two examples where we have a machlekes in Rav and Shmuel. Ha'isa nekev bilul shel tam negolim. A person bores a hole in a chicken coop, a wooden chicken coop, so it's not attached to the ground, and he makes a hole to allow the fumes to exit. So he's improving the chicken coop. He's fixing it. Rav Amar Mishum Baina. He's building. Shmuel Amar Mishum Makav Patish. He's not building. He's merely putting the finishing touches on this coop. He's repairing it. He's improving it. It's called Makav Patish. It's not called Baina. It's not a significant enough act to be considered building. The third example is Ayel Shufsa B'Kufina de Mara. So Mara is a hoe, a shovel, and the Shufsa is this peg which was inserted, wedged into the kufina, the hole. So they had the shovel and a handle, the wooden handle, which would go into this encasement of the metal bottom, and there was a hole there in which they would wedge a peg to keep the handle in place. If a person sticks that peg in there to enable the use of this shovel, Ayol Shufse places the peg into the hole of the shovel. Once again, Rav Amar Mishum Baina. He is chayiv on account of Baina because he repaired, he assembled this shovel, he enabled it for use. It's not significant enough to be considered Baina. Rather, he's doing a malacha makav patish because he's enabling this kli for use. He's putting the finishing touches on this kli, and that is the malacha. Says, well, why do we need three examples and three discussions, three machlekes in Rav and Shmuel utzricha? We need all three. Why can't we learn one from the other? The Yashvin Kamaisa, because if the Gemara only tell us the first case of the chiseling of the stone, I would say, Bahi Kama Rav. Yeah, over there Rav holds that it's Bainam. This is the usual manner of building. A construction of a building calls for chiseled stones. So this is considered to be binyan when he prepares a stone, he chisels and prepares it for building. However, in the case where he punctures this chicken coop, that's not considered to be derech binyan. So perhaps in that case, he would agree to Shmuel that is not considered to be a significant enough act to be regarded as binyan. He's merely repairing, he's improving an item, a chayfetz, a coop. Now, if the Gemara would inform us, yes, that in this case as well, Rav holds it's baina, I would say, Baha kama Rav. Yeah, in this case, Rav maintains that it's baina, mishum the dami lebinyan, because it is similar to true building, the avdi la'avira, because he made this hole for ventilation, to allow the fumes to go out and allow fresh air to come in. This is similar to what's done in the usual building process, where they would form windows, and Rashi says they make holes la'avir for ventilation. So this is very strikingly similar to ordinary building, which is done in usual constructions, considered to be doimel binyan. So here as well, Rav maintains that this hole bored into the lul shatan negolim has a form of binyan, and that's why it's chayiv. Avol shufsa b'kofina demara. But regarding that peg which wedges the handle into the shovel, the ein derech binyan v'kach, that's not regarded as the usual manner of building. He's simply enabling use. He's not building something. Perhaps perhaps he would agree, concede to Shmuel, that it is not binyan but rather makav patish. Therefore, the Gemara needs to inform us in all three cases, Rav holds that it is considered to be binyan. V'yashvina baha. Now, in the reverse, if the Gemara only informs us the case of the shovel, I would say perhaps baha kama Shmuel. Yeah, over here Shmuel maintains that it's not significant, it's not boina. However, in the former two, in the previous two, with the stone being chiseled or the coop being repaired, perhaps over there it's significant enough and regarded as boina, and Shmuel concedes to Rav tzricha. That's why the Gemara needs to inform us in all three cases. We have an equal machlekes, Rav, who regards these things as boina. He's improving, he's fashioning, he's crafting, he's building. According to Shmuel, these are not significant enough acts to be regarded as boina. Rather, at most he's doing makav patish. He's putting the finishing touches on these things, and that is the malacha that's involved. When one chisels a stone, on account of what is he chayiv? What did he do wrong? So Rabbi Yochanan responded with a gesture of his hand. He went like this. He took his fist and banged it on his palm as a symbol, to symbolize the patish, the hammer which is striking its blow. So Rabbi Yochanan concurs with Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Va'anan Tanan. But we have learned in our own Mishnah, Ha-mesates ve'ha-makav patish. One chisels and he will do makav patish, implying that there are two different things. Ema ha-mesates ha-makav patish. Interpret the Mishnah as follows. If a person chisels, which is a malacha makav patish, is chayv. Tashma. Come and listen to this raya from the Bryce. Ha-kodech kol shu chayv. If one drills a small hole, he's chayv. Rashi says when the term kodech is employed, we're referring to a hole which is meant to be filled. He's going to insert a nail in there to hang from it. So even if he merely drills that hole, he's already chayiv. HaKadech kol shu chayiv. Now let's analyze. Bishlam il Rav. It works well according to Rav, who maintains that when a person bores a hole in this chicken coop, that is already significant. That qualifies as boina. Here as well. Mechsi, it appears command the charchursa, as though he's boring a hole in binyana to improve the building. This already qualifies as a malach of boina, even hadn't yet plugged it, hadn't yet filled it with a nail. So even though he didn't conclude his malacha, it is already an improvement on the building. It's called boina. El Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, maintains that merely boring that hole in the chicken coop, that's not significant enough, and therefore it's not boina. Rather, it is makav patish because he's putting the finishing touches on that coop. But in our case, he hasn't yet finished until he plugs the hole with a nail. So where is the makav patish? El Shmuel, lav gmar malachu. He hasn't yet completed his malach. This is not igmar malachu. Lav gmar malachu. Until he puts that nail in, this is not igmar malachu. Hachumay we're speaking about the baze. How did he puncture? But ran to the parcel using a pointed nail, an iron nail. V'shafke begavei, and he banded. He left the nail in there for hanging purposes. So he did two for one. He bored the hole with hanging the nail in there at once, and indeed the hainu gmar malacha. This indeed is a completion of the malacha, and therefore according to Shmuel is chayiv because of makav patish. So in summary, we have three cases where Rav holds he did boina, Shmuel holds it's makav patish. Number one, mesate 7, chiseling the stone. Number two, he makes a hole in a chicken coop, and number three, he affixes he sticks the peg into the shovel to affix to apply the handle and to enable the shovel's use. In all three cases, Rav holds he has built. These things qualify as boina. According to Shmuel, they're not significant enough to be considered boina. Rather, the malacha here is on account of makav patish, putting the finishing touches, the completing step on these various items. So in summary, let's make a chazara of today's blot. We began with the Mishnah, which told us that a person throws a chayfetz, whether he's throwing from a shizach to shirab and doing a malacha beitzah, or he's attempting to inflict a chabura, he will be chayiv provided he was at a state of shgoga, unawareness, at the outset, at the tchila, and at the conclusion as well. But if he was at a state of mazid, of awareness, whether it was at the beginning or at the end, he'll be patur. The Gemara concluded that this applies even to throwing, even though it's not in his hands. Nevertheless, he could still influence the chain of events, and if during the conclusion, if when that chayfetz lands, he is at a state of mazid, of awareness, he's patur. The Gemara told us, what about a case where a person transfers a chayfetz at a distance of 6 amas or surabim? The first 2 amas will be shaykik, the next 2 will be mazid, and the final 2 will be shaykik. The Gemara says it depends what he did. If he was maver, if he was transferring it manually, he was holding it as he was walking along, he will be patur. Because why? Because the shiur concluded, what was the shiur? The shiur was, when he reached the point of 4 amas, that is the shiur required for maver, at that point he was b'mezid. So we split the malacha. We consider the point of 4 amas as the conclusion of the malacha, of that part of the malacha, and since he was at a point of mezid, he's patur. Whereas in the case of zorik, when it's out of his hands, he can't split the malacha any longer. It's out of his hands. It is regarded as one straight malacha. From the beginning to the end, we focus on the initiation and the conclusion. And since at both of those points he was at a state of shogeg, he is chayiv. The Gemara told us that in the case where a person throws a chayfetz and it happened to land, b'pi kelev or b'pi kivshan, he's patur, because those are not significant surfaces. However, if he intended on having the chayfetz land there, his machshava grants significance to those areas, and it is considered to be a proper hanacha. The Mishnah discussed boina, And even a baina kosher is chayav, the Gemara tells us, because the balabais will plug up even a small hole in his wall. So even that has benefit. Likewise, in the Mishkan, they would close up the hole in the crushim. The Gemara concluded that when placing a stone, it depends where he's placing it. On the bottom level, he requires leveling with the earth. The next section requires cement, and the uppermost layer merely requires placement of the stone, even if it's not level. In all three cases, he will be doing baina. We have three cases of machlokes in Rav and Shmuel, where Rav says he has done baina. According to Shmuel, merely makeh v'patish.